Leadership Presidential Council promised to work towards peace and end the conflict in the country. Houthi militia continues to violate the United Nations brokered truce by attacking Ma'rib. The UN warns that the aging Safer oil tanker is at imminent risk and needs immediate intervention. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English News with me, Shaza Abdelbey. The UN envoy to Yemen, Hans Grunberg, arrived in Oman. The Omani foreign minister received the UN envoy, and the two sides exchanged views on efforts made to secure the continuation of the truce and entering into a political process that achieves the aspirations of the Yemeni people. Head of the Presidential Leadership Council gave his first address to Yemenis after assuming the authorities of the president. He said he is committed to making peace and ending the conflict. This report has more details.
Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi announced Thursday in the Saudi capital of Riyadh that he has handed over all his powers to the newly formed Presidential Leadership Council that will succeed him in running the government and holding peace talks with the Houthis. The political reshuffle, along with the ongoing 2-month ceasefire, are viewed as a new hope of ending the country's 7-year civil war. However, political analysts believe there is still a long way to go before achieving lasting peace in the war-torn country. Hours after Hadi announced the transfer of power, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met with members of the council in Riyadh, during which the Crown Prince pledged billions of dollars in aid to Yemen. The United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, and the Arab League also welcomed the establishment of the PLC. The council of 8 members is headed by Rashad Mohammed Al-Alimi, an advisor to Hadi and former Interior Minister under the late President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Analysts said the forming of a more representative PLC is a key consensus reached during the Yemeni peace consultations held in late March in Riyadh. The Riyadh talks, backed by the United Nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council, grouped scores of Yemeni political, tribal, and religious leaders, activists, economists, and leaders of non-governmental organizations. The participants came up with recommendations for an institutional reform that will lead Yemen out of the political system that's cracked with corruption and ineffectiveness. Analysts also have cautioned that the route to achieving lasting peace in Yemen is still a long and strenuous one. Speaking of the ceasefire and the government reshuffle, political experts raise the question that what matters most is whether these positive factors can really translate into lasting peace across Yemen. The PLC is a very anti-Houthi one, as it compromises some of the most steadfast Houthi opponents. Moreover, the truce lacked effective monitoring mechanisms, despite Saudi Arabia and Iran having expressed support. So the sporadic clashes may quickly spiral into a full-blown conflict once again. Since April 2, the Yemeni government and the Houthi have repeatedly accused each other of breaking the truce. Clashes between the two sides erupted in the government-held Ma'rib province almost on a daily basis. Meanwhile, the planned reopening of Sana'a International Airport, as mentioned in the ceasefire agreement, has yet to be implemented. With all of that in mind, the new political system that has been already refused by the rebels could face many challenges before it even starts its early steps.
The Houthi militia refused the announcement of a new Yemeni Presidential Council headed by Rashid Al-Alaimi. The Houthi rebels said they will not recognize it or deal with it in any future peace negotiations. In continuation of their violations of the truce announced a week ago by the UN, Houthi militia targeted Ma'rib with a missile. The media center of the government forces stated that the Houthi rebels launched a missile and did not mention any other details related to the casualties or the place where the missile landed. 5 Houthi militia members were killed and injured in an attack by tribal gunmen on a security headquarters south of the capital Sana'a. Local sources said angry tribal gunmen attacked a police station in order to free a detained girl. The sources indicated that clashes took place between the gunmen and the Houthi militia resulted in the killing of 2 Houthi members and the injury of 3 others. Houthi militia stormed a mosque in Sana'a during Taraweeh prayers. Sources outlined that the militia stormed the mosque with the aim of broadcasting a recorded lecture of their militia leader through the mosque's speakers. In Taiz, the Houthi militia launched a heavy attack on residential neighborhoods. Local sources said the militia shelled with tanks and heavy artillery the residential neighborhoods located in west of Taiz. Suffering of displaced people in Yemen seems to see no end. Their journey to seek shelter and food is constantly challenged. What makes things worse is that they have limited access to humanitarian aid. This report has more details.
Millions of dollars in relief support are looted in the name of the displaced and those affected by the war, from which relief organizations and their workers, whether external or local, benefit from it while only crumbs remain for the displaced. Stories of corruption practiced in all its stages, starting with response, planning, and implementation, but they do not often benefit the displaced as they should, as they are in dire need of humanitarian assistance after they lost their source of income.
The relief aid that are supposed to be delivered to displaced people to cover their needs during the holy month of Ramadan are actually being delivered to others, and you find them in large quantities in black market under control of traders. The displaced people only receive a very small part of it, around 10% of the actual dues, and the rest goes to other people who don't need any of it. These days, the prices are really high. Everything is very expensive, and by time the situation worsens more instead of getting better. It seems like there is no end to this crisis.
Lists and records that follow and monitor the movement of displacement, and with one word in front of the displaced person to decide whether his name falls from the list records or not, and if he really deserves to get relief aid, although the monitoring periods reach a year or more. On the other hand, the markets are filled with food baskets in the black market, and they are sold for half of their basic value in food stores. As the markets of Ma'rib witness great crowding by the displaced and poor families to get their needs during the month of Ramadan, because the prices are low amid the absence of humanitarian relief in the city.
We live in Al Jufaina. Nothing of aid has reached us. No mattresses, no dates. We lack everything. I had to buy dates to break my fast during Ramadan. Get available for sale. We've no idea how such aid gets distributed. The flour is available in this market. No mattresses. We can't get mattresses unless we buy them from this market. No blankets, nothing. Look, you can see it with your own eyes. Humanitarian aid is being sold in this market.
The spread of corruption in relief organizations and the absence of oversight, in addition to the distribution of relief aid to those who do not deserve it as gifts or favors, while reducing the size of the food basket distribution. All factors worsen the suffering of the displaced and steal the livelihood of thousands of families who were displaced by the Houthi war to struggle with another war to survive.
The United Nations announced an $80 million as an emergency plan to rescue the floating Safer oil tanker. David Gracely, the UN resident and humanitarian coordinator, said the UN plan is possible to address this danger. This report has more details.
Environmental contamination problems that have occurred or are projected to occur in the Yemeni territory are being overshadowed by the continuing conflict in Yemen. The FSO Safer oil tanker, moored on Yemen's western coast, north of Hodeidah, is the most serious pollution case affecting Yemen and its nearby coastal villages. The FSO Safer used to receive about 100,000 barrels of crude oil per day from the Ma'rib oil fields before offloading to vessels for export. The tanker currently sails near Yemen's most vital and environmentally sensitive maritime area. The corroded FSO Safer now holds around 1.1 million barrels of crude oil, despite the fact that it has not been repaired since the conflict began in 2015. Any unintentional leak would result in an oil spill that might spread to nearby marine and delicate coastal environments. The massive amount of oil expected to spill could result in a humanitarian and environmental disaster, affecting the biodiversity of about 115 Yemeni islands in the Red Sea, coral reefs, fisheries, and other land and marine habitats, as well as hundreds of thousands of Yemeni coastal communities. According to reports, the oil spill may harm more than 3 million farmers in Tehama, potentially polluting their agricultural areas. Furthermore, the fishing sector, which employs a major section of Yemen's population, would be socially and economically devastated. Hundreds of thousands of Yemeni fishermen would become unemployed as a result of the impending disaster. The tourism industry would also suffer greatly, and thousands more jobs will be destroyed. All of this would result in greater unemployment, aggravated famine, and the economic collapse of coastal communities.
Coming next. Despite the war and high prices, people in Al Dala insist on celebrating rituals of Ramadan as usual.
رمضان قبل الحرب كان الحمد لله، ورمضان الحالي من الحرب ما طلع واحنا بالتعس ولا والمتاعب.
فرق كبير، فرق بالأسعار، فرق بالحالة النفسية بين الأسر، الفرق بين الأشياء التي كانت نحن نقدر نستطيع نشتريها الآن.
هي الوجبة المفضلة كانت الشفوت، لكن لو قلت أن ما زالت موجودة لا.
الوجبات هذه معافش وجبات عين رسمية، المواطن الآن معاه يتحمس وجبة رسمية، اللي هدلوا يستخدموه، الأكل أي أكل يأكلوه.
عاد من الشهر السابق كنت أقدر يعني أشتري قطمة 10 كيلو 5 كيلو، أما من دحين الأسعار ارتفعت يعني ما أقدرش أشتري، يا الله أشتري نص كيلو.
الأسعار فوارق، يعني كأنه تدريجيا حق 10 سنوات، حق 10 سنوات بحصله بشهرين، يعني فوارق خيالية.
السنة الغذائية تفرق كل شيء، تفرق همنا، تفرق كل حاجة علينا، نستفيد منه كل شيء.
Welcome back. The World Food Programme said the high prices of basic foodstuffs in Yemen as a result of the repercussions of the war in Ukraine are pushing millions of Yemenis to starvation. The United Nations said millions of Yemenis do not have enough food during Ramadan in light of the worst humanitarian crisis in the world in the country. The ongoing war has caused the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, with about 2/3 of the population in need of humanitarian assistance to save their lives. Over 5 million people in Yemen are on the brink of famine due to the ongoing conflict and the economic decline. Now the Ukraine conflict has aggravated the food crisis in Yemen, especially among children and women. This report has more details.
Skyrocketing wheat prices due to the Russian military operation in Ukraine could put millions of children at risk of illness or even death due to hunger in the world's most fragile contexts such as Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria. The Child Rights Organization is calling for an immediate end to the violence, not only to protect children in Ukraine but also to prevent further escalation of what is already the worst global hunger crisis in this century. Russia and Ukraine account for a significant amount of the world's wheat supply, together exporting more than a quarter of the world's wheat in 2019. The current violence is set to cause a sharp rise in global grain prices, with wheat predicted to rise up to 50% in some countries. In Yemen, where 95% of wheat is imported, including more than 30% from Russia and Ukraine, wheat and bread make up over half of the calorie intake for the average household. Food prices in the country have already more than doubled in the past couple of years, with families forced to reduce food portions or skip meals completely in order to cope. According to the World Food Programme, over half of the population is facing acute hunger. Save the Children's country director in Yemen said, "The crisis unfolding in Ukraine is having a ripple effect on children elsewhere in the world. Our hearts are breaking for the children in Ukraine, but I cannot stop thinking of the additional horrors that may unfold if this conflict does not stop immediately." In Yemen, 8 million children are already on the brink of famine. Families are exhausted. They have faced horror after horror through 7 years of war. We fear they will not be able to endure another shock, especially to the main ingredient keeping their children alive. No more children should die of starvation. With the country experiencing record high inflation and with more and more families struggling to put food on the table, shortages of staple foods or further hikes in food prices will exacerbate an already desperate situation. Besides the actual conflict in Yemen, a number of factors have impacted, including the rapid currency depreciation that undermined purchasing power, Iran seaport closures, lack of import financing support, soaring and volatile fuel prices, and now the escalation in Ukraine. All of this has caused half of the population to go hungry, and today we are anticipating a catastrophe beyond anything we ever thought possible that's going to devastate the country.
Despite the hard living conditions, people in Al Dala continue to celebrate Ramadan. This report has more details.
Despite the conditions of the ongoing war, the high prices and the absence of some necessary services, the people of Al Dala received the holy month of Ramadan with joy and happiness. Although this joy was marred by the inability of many heads among the family to provide Ramadan requirements that families were accustomed to during the blessed month, as many foods and dishes disappeared during this year due to the high prices, not to mention the continued displacement that hit thousands of families in the north and west of Al Dala.
We welcome the holy month of Ramadan with happiness, despite all the circumstances that we are going through. Although last year we welcomed Ramadan with our iftar meals, the prices forced us this year to sacrifice food and go minimal. And this holy month is not like the others that we have lived through in the past years.
The city of Al Dala has witnessed a lot of events and activities during Ramadan, and despite the absence of services such as electricity, water, and others, people of Al Dala are keen to revive the heritage during this month.
وعيشتها حقيرة ومدتها قصيرة الله من الله من العين الرحيمات.
مجالس محافظة الضالع تمتاز.
Gatherings at the Governorate of Al Dala are differentiated with its religious cultural programs throughout Ramadan. For example, parts of the Holy Quran are being read in these gatherings. Sermon lectures are being held, especially on the night of Fate, or what is known as Laylat al-Qadr. We are doing religious competitions too, to encourage people to know more about their religion.
The days of Ramadan have a special flavor in the cities and villages of Al Dala, and there are many cultural manifestations and social initiatives in which young and old participate, and prayers to God for the homeland to return security, safety, and prosperity to the country after the devastation has affected many families.
Owners of shops and street vendors in Ujur city of Abyan, southern Yemen, carried out a total civil disobedience. They protested against the state of security chaos in the city during the recent period. The shop owners complained the high rate of crimes against innocent citizens. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. The new leadership presidential council promised to work towards peace and end the conflict in the country. Houthi militia continues to violate the United Nations brokered truce by attacking Ma'rib. The UN warns that the aging Safer oil tanker is at imminent risk and needs immediate intervention. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.